When our HOA president tasered my mom over a navy blue mailbox, she had no idea she'd just assaulted Cumberland County's top prosecutor, who's taken down crime bosses and murderers for 15 years. What happens when the most feared legal mind in the state decides your corrupt homeowners association is her next big case? I jolted upright when the doorbell shattered the early morning calm at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Who dares disturb us at this ungodly hour? I crept to the window, peering out to find Cynthia Reynolds, the tyrannical HOA president, drilling her heel into our welcome mat with impatience. Her bright red fingernails were as fierce as her lipstick, clutching a piece of paper like a weapon. Mom was still in her pajamas, cradling her coffee when she swung the door open. I lingered in the hallway, eyes glued to the unfolding drama. "Catherine, this is a violation notice," Cynthia barked, skipping any pretense of a greeting. She slapped the paper into Mom's hand with the precision of a general delivering orders. "Your mailbox color is not approved. The fine is $47 due by next Friday." Mom's gaze drifted to our freshly painted navy blue mailbox standing defiantly by the curb. "What exactly is wrong with it?" she demanded, her voice edged with tension. "It violates HOA Code 39.2b. All external fixtures must use approved colors." Cynthia's voice dripped with that saccharine venom adults wield when masking malice with politeness. "I checked the guidelines before painting," Mom countered, her tone unwavering. "There's no list of banned colors." Cynthia's smile evaporated, replaced by a steely glare. "The board knows unapproved colors when we see them. Navy isn't on our approved list." "May I see this list?" Mom pressed. "It's in our internal documents. Pay the fine or repaint it white by Friday," Cynthia snapped, turning on her heel and strutting away, her stilettos stabbing the pavement with each step. Mom shut the door, her eyes fixed on the notice with disdain. "This is absurd," she muttered. As Cumberland County's top prosecutor for 15 years, she was accustomed to bringing down murderers and gang bosses, not squabbling over mailbox hues. I joined her in the kitchen, whipping up pancakes as she regaled me with tales from the courthouse. "In my job, Jamie, evidence matters. Facts matter, not just because someone important says so." Just then, the chaos next door erupted. Cars swarmed in like a plague as Mrs. Winters launched yet another thunderous garden party, her third this month. The guests' vehicles choked half our driveway, and the music exploded so violently the windows trembled in their frames. "Let's document it first," Mom said. She took photos of the cars and used her phone to measure the noise level with an app. 78 dB, way over the 65 allowed by HOA rules. Through our kitchen window, I spotted Cynthia arriving at the party. She hugged Mrs. Winters, accepted a drink, and then both women looked toward our house, laughing. My stomach felt worried. "Mom, look," I whispered. She watched for a minute. "Interesting. Selective enforcement might be happening here." That afternoon, she wrote a polite email requesting the architectural guidelines that mention mailbox colors. "Always start with assuming it's just a mistake," she told me. "Never jump to thinking people are being deliberately unfair." Monday passed with no response. Tuesday, too. On Wednesday, another notice appeared on our door. Now a $120 fine for failure to comply promptly with the violation notice. Mom called the HOA office 4 times. Each time they transferred her to voicemail. On the 5th call, someone finally answered. "HOA office, how can I help you?" a bored voice said. "This is Catherine Morgan at 1872 Pinewood Drive. I'm calling about 2 fines I've received regarding my mailbox, and I'm requesting a copy of the color guidelines." "That information is only available at board meetings," the voice replied. "When is the next meeting?" "It was yesterday. The next one is in 2 months. Mom's lawyer face appeared. The calm, focused look I knew meant trouble for someone. Not angry, just determined. "I'll need to speak with Cynthia directly then." "She's very busy this week." The call suddenly disconnected. That evening, Mrs. Winters' teenage son threw a football that knocked over our garden gnome, shattering it. When Mom went over to discuss it politely, Mrs. Winters claimed she didn't see anything happen and shut the door in Mom's face. As Mom swept up the broken pieces, a shiny black SUV parked in front of our house. Cynthia emerged with two men in polo shirts, HOA board member, embroidered on them. "Catherine," Cynthia called out, walking onto our property without asking. "These fines need immediate attention. We're here to collect payment." "I've been trying to reach you for days," Mom replied. "I need to see the section that prohibits navy blue specifically." The taller man stepped forward. "The board has discretion to determine aesthetic violations. Pay now, or we'll place a lien on your property." Mom stood straight, suddenly looking like she did in the courtroom. "Are you an attorney, sir? Because placing a lien requires specific legal procedures, not just threats on someone's front lawn." The man's face reddened. Cynthia cut in. "We know the law, Catherine. You have 3 days to pay both fines plus a $25 late fee. Otherwise, things will become very unpleasant for you." As they walked away, I whispered, "Mom, don't these seem like bullies?" She watched them go, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, but bullies usually pick on people they think won't fight back." She pulled out her phone, took pictures of our mailbox from multiple angles, and then called her assistant at the prosecutor's office. "Derek, I need a favor. Can you pull property records for Pinecrest Gardens HOA, also any complaints filed against them in the last 5 years? Thanks." She turned to me with a little smile. "Let's see if other neighbors have had similar problems." Knowledge is power, Jamie. That night, I heard Mom on the phone with Judge Wilson, her old law school friend. She rarely brought work home, but something about her voice told me this mailbox thing was becoming much more than a simple fine. I fell asleep wondering what would happen in 3 days when the payment was due. Little did I know, our quiet life in Pinecrest Gardens was about to explode. What secret was Cynthia hiding that made her so desperate to control every detail of our neighborhood? Friday morning, I woke up to a weird clicking sound outside my window. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Cynthia Reynolds walking around our yard with a camera, taking pictures of everything. Our flower beds, the porch, even the gap between our garbage cans. When she aimed her camera up at my window, I ducked down, heart pounding. "Mom!" I called out. She was already dressed for work in her charcoal gray suit, her sending people to jail outfit. She marched outside and I followed, staying behind her like she was my shield. "Cynthia, what are you doing on my property?" Mom asked, her voice super calm but somehow scary too. Cynthia jumped, almost dropping her expensive camera. "Documenting violations, Catherine. It's my duty as HOA president." "What violations exactly?" Mom folded her arms. Cynthia checked her clipboard. "Your lawn is 0.3 inches too high. Your garbage cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes yesterday. The garden hose isn't properly stored, and that mailbox remains unauthorized." She sounded like she was reading from a list she'd practiced. "How exactly did you measure my grass?" Mom asked. Cynthia pulled out a special tool from her purse. Precision lawn height gauge, standard HOA equipment. Mom held out her hand. "May I see the HOA bylaws section about grass height?" Cynthia's smile tightened. "The board has discretion to interpret aesthetic standards. Pay the accumulated fines by 5 p.m. today or face consequences." She spun around and marched away, her clipboard clutched to her chest. At breakfast, Mom's phone kept buzzing with messages from her office. She was supposed to be preparing for a big trial, but instead, she was digging through a stack of HOA documents we'd found in our move-in papers. "Jamie, look at this," she said, pointing to a page. "The HOA guidelines say nothing about mailbox colors except that they must be maintained in good condition, which ours definitely is." Mom spent her lunch break at the county records office. When she came home that evening, her eyes had that sparkly look they got when she solved a tough case. "Something fishy is happening in Pinecrest Gardens," she told me, spreading papers across our kitchen table. 3 families on our street left suddenly last year, the Washingtons, Patels, and Garcias. All sold their homes for way below market value after receiving multiple HOA violations. She pointed to property records. "And guess who bought those houses through different company names that all trace back to the same owner? Reynolds Property Holdings, as in Cynthia Reynolds." "That's so wrong," I said, understanding why Mom looked so fired up. "Instead of paying these fake fines," Mom said, "I'm sending a formal letter requesting a hearing, as is my right under state law." She worked on the letter all evening, citing laws that sounded like secret codes. Pursuant to Civil Code Section 5855, in violation of due process requirements under Davis Sterling. As Mom sealed the envelope, she said, "Always fight bullies with knowledge, Jamie. They expect fear, but we'll give them facts." After dinner, I was washing dishes when our water suddenly stopped. The faucet sputtered and went dry. Mom and I went outside with flashlights to check the main valve near the sidewalk. The metal cover was ajar, and Mom carefully lifted it. "Someone's tampered with this," she said, pointing to fresh scratch marks around the valve that was firmly in the off position. She turned it back on, and we heard water flow again through our pipes. As we stood up, headlights swept across us. Mrs. Winters drove by slowly, phone to her ear, watching us. The next morning, Mom found a deep scratch along the side of her car. That afternoon, our garbage wasn't collected, though everyone else's was. On Monday, my principal called me to the office to ask about reports of screaming from our house, which never happened. Each time something occurred, Mom documented it carefully, taking pictures, writing down times and dates, and saving every piece of mail we received. On Wednesday, we received a certified letter stating we now owed $2,300 in accumulated fines, penalties, and administrative fees. It also mentioned an emergency HOA board meeting that Friday, where they would vote on placing a lien on our home. Mom called the prosecutor's office and took a rare day off. She spread all her evidence across the dining table: photos, bylaws, property records, and printouts of laws I couldn't understand. "Jamie," she said while highlighting sections of paper, "I think they're targeting houses they want to flip for profit. The three families who left all had small issues that exploded into huge fines, like our mailbox." I asked, "Exactly, but they picked the wrong house this time." Mom reached for her phone and called her friend Sarah, who worked at the local newspaper. "Hey, it's Catherine. Remember that story you wanted about community corruption? I might have something better than what we discussed." That night, someone left a dead bird on our porch. When Mom found it in the morning, she didn't look scared. She looked determined. She called the police non-emergency line and reported it as harassment. Later, I overheard her on the phone. "Derek, I need every file we have on intimidation tactics used by organized groups. Yes, like gangs, but also business operations. And get me everything on RICO applications to non-criminal enterprises." At dinner, Mom told me she was going to the emergency HOA meeting tomorrow night. "This ends now," she said, her prosecutor face fully on. "I want to come too," I insisted. "I've seen everything that's happened." After thinking for a minute, she nodded. "Okay, but stay close to me." As we finished eating, 3 more HOA violation notices were shoved under our door. One claiming our porch light was excessively bright, another saying our welcome mat was non-standard, and a third about the unauthorized occupancy of our garden gnome replacement. Mom just laughed, which wasn't the reaction I expected. "They're getting desperate," she said. "They know I'm not backing down." That night I couldn't sleep, thinking about the meeting. What would happen when Mom confronted Cynthia with all her evidence? And why was our little navy blue mailbox worth all this trouble? I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, our quiet neighborhood dispute would turn into something that would make the evening news across the entire state. Would Mom's years of putting away dangerous criminals prepare her for what Cynthia was willing to do to protect her secret real estate scheme? I felt my heart pounding as we walked into the packed community center. Cynthia sat at the front table like a queen on her throne, whispering and laughing with Mrs. Winters while pointing at us. The room went silent when we entered. 50 neighbors suddenly became very interested in their shoes. "You shouldn't have come," whispered Mr. Rodriguez, our friendly neighbor from across the street. "Cynthia's been bragging all day about how she's going to make an example of your family." Mom squeezed my hand. "That's exactly why we're here." When Mom signed up to speak, Cynthia rolled her eyes. The sign-up sheet mysteriously disappeared right after 6 people spoke about garden gnome regulations and pool hours. Before Cynthia tried to end the meeting, we still had speakers on the list. "We still have speakers on the list," called out an elderly man in the back. "Catherine Morgan hasn't had her turn." Mom walked confidently to the microphone. "She looked different tonight. Not just my mom, but Prosecutor Morgan, the woman criminals feared. My name is Catherine Morgan. I've lived in Pinecrest Gardens for 8 years, and I'm here to address the false fines against my property and the pattern of harassment my family has experienced. Cynthia's face turned red. This isn't on the agenda. According to HOA Bylaw Section 4.3, residents may address grievances during open comments. I've documented 17 instances of selective enforcement, including... Cynthia slammed her hand on the table. Your 3 minutes are up. I've just started speaking, Mom said calmly. Actually, she's only spoken for 20 seconds, said the elderly man, holding up his phone timer. Cynthia stood up, her voice shaking. You're disrupting this meeting with baseless accusations. I'm calling security. 2 large men wearing black polo shirts with HOA enforcement patches emerged from a side door. One had a flashlight. The other, a belt with pepper spray, handcuffs, and something I couldn't quite see. Miss Morgan, you need to leave now, said the larger man, grabbing Mom's arm roughly. Take your hands off me, Mom said, her voice steady but firm. I have the legal right to speak at this meeting. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. Phones came out as neighbors started recording. She's becoming hostile, Cynthia announced loudly. Remove her immediately. It happened so fast. The second guard pulled something from his belt, a small black device with 2 metal prongs. There was a cracking sound like electricity, and suddenly, Mom's body went stiff. The taser wires connected to her chest, and she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking violently. I screamed and ran to her. Stop, you're hurting her! Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Gomez from 2 doors down shouted, Call 911! 3 neighbors rushed forward to help Mom. Cynthia stood at her table, completely unmoved. Our security team is authorized to use reasonable force when homeowners become threatening, she said. She was just talking, I shouted through tears, holding Mom's hand as she struggled to breathe. Her eyes were wide with shock and pain. The security guard who tasered her smirked. Should have paid your fines, lady. Mr. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd. Are you insane? You can't taser someone for speaking at a meeting. She was aggressive, Cynthia insisted as shocked neighbors began yelling. I felt threatened, watched Mom's face change as she caught her breath. Her eyes narrowed, and I recognized that look. The same one she got before walking into court to face the worst criminals in Cumberland County. Phone, she whispered to me, her voice shaky but determined. Back pocket. Call Judge Wilson, then Detective Ramirez. Who exactly did you just assault? Mrs. Gomez asked Cynthia loudly. Do you even know who she is? Cynthia waved her hand dismissively. Just another entitled homeowner who thinks rules don't apply to her. That's Cumberland County Chief Prosecutor Catherine Morgan, Mr. Rodriguez announced. The woman who took down the West Side Gang and sent 3 corrupt politicians to prison last year. The security guards exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered something to Cynthia, whose smug smile vanished instantly. Sirens wailed in the distance as paramedics rushed in to check on Mom. I heard her whisper something that sent chills down my spine. I've been looking for my next big case. Looks like I just found it. Blue and red police lights flashed across our street as news vans parked everywhere. 6 reporters shoved microphones in my face while I tried to get to the hospital. Is it true your mom was tasered over a mailbox? One shouted. Does your mom plan to sue the HOA? Yelled another. Mom spent the night in the hospital with heart tests to make sure the taser hadn't caused damage. By morning, her office had sent 2 investigators to our house. They carried out boxes of evidence we'd collected over months, photos, emails, the fake violation notices. You recorded the whole thing? Detective Ramirez asked, watching the video I'd taken on my phone. Mom told me to always document everything, I replied. The detective's eyes widened when she saw Mom collapse from the taser. This isn't just assault, she muttered. This is reckless endangerment. Judge Wilson personally signed the search warrants. 3 police cars surrounded the HOA office by noon. Officers carried out computers and filing cabinets while neighbors watched from their driveways. When Mom came home that afternoon, wearing her court suit despite the doctor's advice to rest, 7 patrol cars escorted her. Neighbors lined the streets, applauding as she walked slowly to our front door. "Are you really going after them?" I asked, helping her to the couch. "They've been hurting people for years," she replied, wincing as she sat down. "Someone had to stop them." The doorbell rang nonstop. Neighbors brought casseroles, flowers, and stories. Mrs. Gonzalez cried as she described how Cynthia had fined her $3,000 for planting unauthorized roses 3 days after Mrs. Gonzalez rejected Cynthia's lowball offer to buy her house. Mr. Patel showed us letters threatening to put a lien on his home over holiday decorations invisible from the street. 2 weeks later, his dream house sold for 30% below market value to a company called Pinecrest Investments. Mom listened carefully, taking notes despite her shaking hands. When Judge Wilson arrived with the district attorney, they spread documents across our dining table. "It's bigger than we thought," the DA whispered. "Cynthia's brother-in-law works at the bank approving these home loans. The security company isn't registered anywhere." 3 days later, Mom stood at our driveway for a press conference, still bruised but standing tall. Today, the Cumberland County Prosecutor's Office has filed 37 charges against 5 members of the Pinecrest Gardens Homeowners Association Board, she announced as cameras flashed. These charges include criminal conspiracy, fraud, falsifying records, assault, practicing law without a license, and multiple civil rights violations. News helicopters circled overhead as police cars pulled up to Cynthia's house. The cameras caught everything, Cynthia being let out in handcuffs, screaming about her rights, while Mom watched calmly from across the street. "The investigation has uncovered what appears to be an organized scheme targeting specific homeowners," Mom continued. "Board members created fake violations and excessive fines to force residents to sell their homes at a loss. Then, they purchased these properties through shell companies for substantial profits. Financial records revealed the shocking truth. Cynthia and 3 board members had created a property flipping company that made over $3 million buying and selling homes in our neighborhood. They'd driven out 14 families through harassment and ridiculous fines. Mrs. Winters wasn't merely a noisy neighbor. She was a mercenary of chaos, earning $500 for each homeowner she helped target by hosting deafening parties and crafting havoc around properties they wanted to seize. The most horrifying revelation came when the police identified the security guard who had tasered Mom. He was Cynthia's nephew, a felon with a rap sheet, freshly released from prison just 6 months prior for aggravated assault. He had no license to wield a taser. Detective Ramirez laid it out for us, and we uncovered evidence that they've used that taser on at least 4 other homeowners who dared to defy their tyranny, Mom said, her voice steely with resolve. A mere 2 weeks later, a judge slammed the brakes on all HOA accounts and suspended the board, pending a thorough investigation. The court appointed a receiver to seize control of neighborhood affairs. Mom, still bearing bandages from the taser probes, marched into court to confront Cynthia at the preliminary hearing. "You think you've won?" Cynthia spat venomously as officers dragged her past us. "This isn't over," Mom retorted with a calm yet fierce smile. "Actually, it ended the moment you decided the rules were for everyone else but you." The neighborhood erupted in celebration at our home when the judge ordered the HOA to be dissolved and restructured under the court's iron grip. The first decree of the newly elected board was the liberation of mailbox colors. Residents could choose any hue they desired. 6 months later, I stood beside Mom as we hung a plaque in her office. A small blue mailbox frame enshrining the taser barbs the hospital had extracted from her chest. "Why keep such a horrific reminder?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. Mom gently touched the frame, her expression unwavering. "To remind us that standing up to bullies is always worth the fight, no matter the pain." Outside our window, a dozen neighbors were painting their mailboxes in bold navy blue, not from obligation, but from a newfound freedom.